She had survived 3 things in her life: starvation, violence, and the kind of silence that comes when nobody fights back for you. But that night, she learned what it felt like when someone finally did. The announcer's voice shattered the silence like glass. Ladies and gentlemen, from the heavens themselves, the masked phantom of the night. Behold Aurora. The ceiling fractured open. She descended like a burning angel, wrapped in emerald velvet that caught the light and held it hostage. Her sapphire mask glittered with secrets, her dark hair flowing like water down her back. The music hit, deep, intoxicating, dangerous. Men whistled, money rained, roses scattered across the stage like blood. Aurora moved like she owned the night. Every twist of her body, every arch of her back, every sway of her hips told a story nobody could read. Behind that mask, she wasn't the broken girl from the mansion. She wasn't the servant they spat on. She wasn't the thing they called worthless. Here, under these lights, she was fire. She was power. She was free. Her mind drifted even as her body burned on stage. He would be here tonight. Minjun. The name alone made grown men swallow hard. They said he could end 1,000 lives without lifting a finger. They said he'd burned entire criminal organizations to ash just for disrespecting him. They said his eyes had made the bravest warriors weep. Women threw themselves at his feet. Men bowed without being asked. He was death walking. He was power incarnate. And if she was smart, if she was brave, maybe, just maybe, she could use him to finally escape. She had never seen him before. But tonight, she would change that. The announcer's voice boomed across the venue, shaking the very foundation of the building. Distinguished guests, rise for the entrance of the most feared man in Seoul, the incomparable Minjun. The air shifted. It actually shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Women froze, their hands flying to their hair. Men straightened their spines like they'd been caught doing something shameful. Even the dancers on stage looked away. This wasn't just an entrance. This was dominance made physical. He walked through the doors like he owned them, owned everything. Tall, broad-shouldered, his black suit cut so sharp it could draw blood. His dark hair slicked back from his forehead, revealing a jawline carved from stone. Cold eyes. Lethal eyes. Eyes that saw everything and cared about nothing. Behind him, his men moved like shadows, like extensions of his will. Whispers flooded the room. Women bit their lips, prayed he'd look at them. Men manufactured smiles, some fake, some desperate with fear. But Minjun didn't acknowledge any of them. He didn't need to. Authority didn't radiate from him. It was him. Every step he took echoed like thunder. Every breath he drew seemed to steal oxygen from everyone else's lungs. Aurora froze mid-dance. Her breath caught. Her heart raced so hard she thought it might explode. She'd expected danger. She hadn't expected beauty. He was dangerous in a way that hurt to look at. His presence swallowed the entire room, consumed it, made it smaller. She'd never believed in such power before. Now she felt it in her bones, in her blood, in the very core of her being. Minjun took his seat, a throne-like chair reserved only for him, positioned at the exact center of everything. The room exhaled as though they'd been suffocating since he arrived. "Continue," the announcer ordered, his voice trembling. The music started again. Aurora forced her body to obey, though her knees felt like they might betray her. She danced, each step deliberate, each movement precise, her mask hiding the storm raging inside her. And then she felt it, his gaze. It wasn't like the other men's stares. This was different. This was invasive. This was stripping her bare. Minjun leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees, his dark eyes locked on her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. He wasn't blinking. He wasn't distracted. He was watching her. Every curve, every movement, every breath. His stare pierced through her mask, through her disguise, through the walls she'd spent years building. It felt like he could see the broken girl underneath, the trapped daughter, the girl nobody wanted. And instead of looking away, he kept watching. He kept seeing. Aurora's lips parted beneath her mask. She'd danced 1,000 times. She'd drawn attention. She'd commanded rooms. But this was different. His gaze didn't make her feel exposed. It made her feel seen. Good, she thought. Let him watch. Let him want to know more. Maybe this is how it starts. Her heart pounding louder than the music, she stepped down from the stage. Slowly, boldly. She walked toward him. Men cheered, thinking it was part of the act. She swayed her hips, her body a weapon, her mask a shield, and then she was standing before him, the Mafia King himself. She moved around him, her perfume filling his air, her body close enough to tempt but untouched. Most men's hands would twitch. They'd reach for her. They'd try to pull her closer. Minjun didn't move. He just watched her. His lips curved into something between a smirk and a warning. Something that said he understood exactly what she was doing, and that he was letting her do it anyway. Then it happened in a fraction of a second. Her heel caught on the edge of the rug. The world tilted. She was falling. But strong hands caught her. Minjun. He pulled her against his chest, his arm firm around her waist, holding her like she weighed nothing. His breath brushed her ear as he leaned close, his voice low and sharp and intimate. Careful, little dove. If you fall from this height, you might never rise again. Aurora's world stopped. His voice was like dark velvet, smooth, dangerous, seductive. His chest was solid against her back. Her body, always so disciplined, always so controlled, melted completely. She forgot why she was there. She forgot her pain. She forgot her mask. She forgot everything except the feeling of his arms around her. Then the announcer's voice shattered the moment like a hammer through glass. Attention guests. Executive Director Kwan Su has arrived. Aurora's blood froze in her veins. The name hit her like ice water. Executive Director Kwan Su, her stepfather. The man who had destroyed her life, the man who had murdered her mother in cold blood, the man whose shadow she'd been running from since childhood, the monster she'd been hiding from every single day. She scrambled off Minjun's lap, her body trembling uncontrollably. She hurried back onto the stage, turned away quickly, let the music hide her frantic breathing. Her eyes found him as he entered, a king of darkness walking through the doors with his men like wolves at his heels. His presence matched Minjun's in its danger, its mercilessness. He sat across from the Mafia King, his eyes sharp, his mouth curved in a mocking smile. Two of the most feared men in Korea, face to face. The air grew tight with tension so thick you could suffocate on it. Everyone watched, waiting for blood or peace. Aurora forced her body to keep moving, though fear crawled under her skin like insects. If he recognized her, even for a second, even just one moment of recognition, it would be her end. This night had only just begun, and already it was spiraling into chaos. Kwan Su sat like he owned the world, his men standing behind him like shadows, their eyes scanning the crowd, their hands ready to draw guns hidden beneath their jackets. Across from him, Minjun leaned back in his chair, one hand resting casually on the armrest, the other swirling red wine in a crystal glass. He looked calm. He looked bored. But Aurora could feel it, the coiled violence underneath, the danger simmering just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to explode. The announcer's voice cracked into the silence. "Gentlemen, the long-awaited meeting begins." The music softened to background noise. Kwan Su raised his glass, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Minjun, I never thought you'd actually come. For years you've fought against me, cut down my men, stolen my businesses. Now here you are seeking peace. How the times have changed." Minjun's lips curved into a half-smile. "Peace is expensive, Director. But sometimes it costs less than war." The crowd chuckled nervously. Everyone knew what hung in the balance. A treaty between these two men could reshape the entire criminal underworld of Korea. Kwon-soo leaned forward, his sharp eyes flashing. "If you want peace with me, there is only one condition." The hall stilled. Even Aurora's body froze mid-turn, her blood running cold. "You must marry one of my daughters." Aurora's heart stopped. His daughters. That included her. Minjun didn't flinch. He set his glass down and studied Kwon-soo with those dark, unblinking eyes. "Why?" he asked, his voice smooth as silk wrapped around steel. "Would I tie myself to your family?" "What makes your daughters worthy of standing beside me?" Kwon-soo smirked. "My daughters are beautiful, obedient, raised in power. To marry into my bloodline means ruling at my side. I'm not just offering you a wife, Minjun. I'm offering you the key to absolute power." The room murmured in agreement. To outsiders, it sounded like an incredible offer. But Aurora knew better. She knew it was a trap disguised as an honor. Minjun tapped his fingers on the table. His gaze shifted from Kwon-soo, past the crowd, to the stage, to her. Aurora's heart stuttered. She almost faltered in her dance. His eyes locked onto hers, even through the mask, searching, piercing, as if he knew she was hiding far more than just her face. She looked away quickly, forcing her hips to sway, forcing her arms to flow like water. But she felt his eyes on her, still pulling her into his world. Finally, Minjun spoke. "I will come to your house. I will meet your daughters. Then I will decide." The crowd exploded in whispers. Shock, thrills, speculation. Kwon-soo's smirk widened. He extended his hand across the table. "Then it is settled." Minjun leaned forward and shook his hand. Their palms met. But it wasn't peace. It was a spark of war waiting to detonate. Aurora rushed into the night, her dark wig hidden in a bag, her mask pressed against her chest. She ran through the alleys, pulling her shawl over her head, her heart still hammering. She changed quickly in her abandoned building. Plain hoodie, jeans, worn shoes, just another invisible girl disappearing into the darkness. By the time she reached home, her chest was burning. As she stepped into the living room, her stepmother, Nari, was waiting. A cruel smile spread across her face. Her 3 daughters sat around her like vultures, eyes full of mockery. "You're late," Nari hissed. "Where have you been, Aurora?" "The market," Aurora said quietly. "I was at the market." Nari's hand cracked across her face before she could finish. The sound echoed through the hall. Aurora's cheek burned, but she didn't cry out. She didn't fall. "Liar," her stepmother spat. "You reek of perfume and cigarette smoke. Who do you think you are, sneaking out like a rat?" Her stepsisters laughed. Ji-won, the eldest, leaned forward with a sneer. "Maybe she's dancing for men." "Who would even want her? She's nothing but trash." "Pathetic," the other added, her voice dripping with envy. "She actually thinks men want her." Nari leaned closer, her breath foul with alcohol and cruelty. "You disgrace this family every time you breathe. You're nothing but a curse, nothing but the trash your dead mother left behind. If not for your stepfather's kindness, you'd be rotting on the streets." Aurora swallowed her anger. Instead, she smiled faintly. "Funny. For someone who's nothing, you all seem pretty obsessed with me." The laughter died instantly. The room went silent. "How dare you talk back?" Nari hissed. She lunged forward and slapped Aurora hard across the face. The sound cracked through the air. Aurora staggered but didn't fall. She lifted her head slowly, her eyes sharp and burning. "You should be grateful you're alive," Nari said coldly. "If not for your stepfather, you'd be nothing." Aurora turned her head back to face her stepmother, her voice steady. "Maybe being nothing would be better than living in this hell." The room went silent. The sisters stared in shock. Nari's face darkened with rage. For a moment, Aurora thought she might strike again. Harder this time. But instead, Nari let out a low, cruel laugh. "You have spirit," she said coldly. "Just like your mother. And just like her, that spirit will get you killed. Remember that." She turned away. waving her hand dismissively. Go to your room. I don't want to see your face. Aurora stood there for a moment, her chest heaving, before she bent to pick up her bag. She didn't bow, she didn't apologize. She simply walked out, her steps steady, her back straight. One day, she would break free. One day, she would take back everything they had stolen. In the tallest tower overlooking the Han River, Minjun sat in his private study. Around him, his most trusted men waited in silence. No one spoke unless spoken to. Minjun's eyes were fixed on the window, but his mind was elsewhere. The dancer, the little dove who had come close enough for him to touch. He'd caught her in his arms for just a moment, but it was enough. The softness of her body, the fire in her movements, the pain in her eyes behind that mask. He couldn't erase it. He couldn't forget it. He'd seen hundreds of women, dancers, models, daughters of politicians who begged for his attention. None had held him. None had made his blood stir. But her? He smirked, shaking his head slightly. Interesting. His second-in-command, Jin Woo, leaned forward. Boss, was the meeting with Director Kwan Su to your satisfaction? Minjun finally turned from the window, his dark gaze falling on Jin Woo. Satisfaction? His tone was cold. I sit with a man who is my rival, and he dares offer me one of his daughters like she's a piece of furniture. Satisfaction is not the word. Jin Woo bowed his head. Do you think he's planning a trap? Minjun leaned back, his long fingers tapping the armrest of his chair. Kwan Su is always planning a trap. But so am I. The room fell silent again. His men understood. For Minjun, every meeting was a battlefield, every smile a weapon. But his mind drifted back against his will to the masked dancer. He remembered the way she'd looked at him, not with blind desire like the others, but with something different, something deeper. Fear? Yes. Pain? Absolutely. But also courage. She had walked to him on her own, bold and unafraid, even when the entire room watched. That was no ordinary woman. Minjun rose from his seat, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the room. He walked toward the window again, hands in his pockets. His reflection stared back at him, but in his mind's eye he saw her. The curve of her body, the tremble in her step, the eyes that looked at him as if she knew him from another life. But he had no time for weakness. Next week, he would walk into the Lion's Den, Director Kwan Su's mansion, to choose a wife. The marriage was nothing but strategy, a weapon disguised as a union. Yet, his mind refused to let go of the dancer with sorrow in her eyes. The days crawled with cruelty. Aurora rose at dawn and worked until night fell. Her stepmother barked orders like she was a servant. Scrub the floors, wash the dishes, do the laundry, fetch this, carry that. Every night she thought of Minjun. If she could just reach him again. If she could make him see her not as a dancer but as a woman, maybe she could finally change her fate. Maybe she could escape, but her stepmother seemed to sense her thoughts. One evening, while the daughters tried on gowns, Nari cornered Aurora in a hallway. Her cold eyes burned into her. Don't even think about it, Aurora. Don't you dare try to entice the Mafia King. Keep your head down, or I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. Aurora's breath caught. Her chest ached, but she lowered her head. Yes, Mother. But inside, her soul screamed. Her stepsisters giggled from across the room. Ji-won sneered. Don't worry, Mother. The Mafia King won't even look at her. Why would he when he has us? They laughed, tossing their expensive gowns around Aurora like weapons. Aurora stayed silent, her heart boiling with rage and desperation. This was the day. Aurora sat in the corner of her small room, listening to the laughter echo through the halls. Her heart pounded in her chest. Today was the day Minjun was coming. She pressed her palm against the window, desperate. If only she could see him again. If only he could see her. The heavy double doors opened and silence fell like a guillotine. Minjun entered, flanked by his men. His presence was thunder and steel. The air tightened. Hearts raced. Every eye in the hall turned to him. The daughters straightened, their painted smiles widening, their giggles rising like birds in spring. Director Kwon-soo strode forward with his arms wide. "Welcome, King Minjun. My home is yours." Minjun's cold gaze swept the room. He saw the chandeliers, the women in gowns, the polished smiles. But his mind wasn't here. His mind was on the dancer. Kwon-soo gestured proudly toward his daughters. "Here are my jewels." 3 daughters, each raised to be a queen. "You may choose whichever pleases you most." 3 stood before him, but Kwon-soo had promised 4. Minjun lifted his glass, took a slow sip, then spoke, his voice deep and cutting through the hall like a blade. "You said 4 daughters. I only see 3. The room fell still. Director Kwon-soo's jaw tightened. Before he could speak, his wife stepped forward, her face painted with false warmth. "Our last daughter is unwell, King Minjun. She suffers from contagious diseases. For your safety, she won't be joining us tonight." A ripple of whispers moved through the hall. The daughters glanced nervously at each other. Minjun's lips curved into a small, dangerous smirk. His eyes narrowed. "Unwell, you say?" He leaned forward. "If I am to join your family, I must see all of your family. Sick or not, hidden or not, bring her to me." The hall froze. Kwon-soo's wife stiffened, but she dared not refuse. One signal from her husband and she'd be dead. A servant was sent scurrying upstairs. Moments later, footsteps echoed. Then she appeared. She walked slowly, her head bowed, her simple dress a stark contrast to the silk and diamonds of her sisters. She looked nothing like the goddess on stage, nothing like the woman who had stolen his breath just nights ago. She looked fragile, breakable, almost invisible. But her eyes, those eyes, Minjun knew them. It was her, the dancer. Those same eyes that had pierced him from behind the mask, eyes filled with pain and fire, eyes that had haunted him every night since. Minjun's heart clenched, though his face remained unreadable. "There," Kwon-soo's wife said quickly, her voice sharp. "You've seen her. Now she will return to her room. She does not belong here with the rest of us." Aurora lowered her head, ready to turn. She knew her place. She knew survival meant obedience. But then his command fractured through the room like thunder. "Stop!" Every head turned. Everybody froze. Even Director Kwon-soo's smirk faltered. Minjun rose slowly from his chair, his presence towering, his aura filling the room with ice and fire. His men straightened behind him, their hands close to their weapons. He stepped forward. Ji-won, the eldest daughter, rushed to his side, her voice sugary sweet. "Please, King Minjun, don't go near her. She could contaminate you. She's weak, useless, not like us. He brushed past her as if she didn't exist, his dark eyes locked on Aurora alone. Every step he took echoed through the silence. Aurora's breath quickened, her knees trembled. She dared not lift her head, but she felt the weight of his gaze pressing down on her like chains. Except it didn't feel cruel. It felt like salvation. He stopped just a breath away from her. The heat of his presence made her skin prickle. He leaned down, his lips barely moving, his words a ghost against her ear. "We meet again, little dove." Her heart stilled. Her eyes snapped up to his for the first time since he arrived. Wide, trembling. He knows. How had he seen past the disguise, past the mask, past the fragile girl her family trampled on? She was certain no one could recognize her outside the stage, but Minjun had. Those words weren't an accident. They were recognition. They were proof that he had seen her. Really seen her. Before she could react, Minjun straightened, his expression unreadable. He turned, his gaze sweeping back to Director Kwon-soo with cold authority. "I will return," he said evenly, his tone a command, not a promise. "When all your daughters are properly presented." He turned and walked out, his coat trailing behind him like a shadow, his men following with military precision. Aurora stood frozen in place, her heart pounding against her ribs. His words still lingered in her ear. Little dove, he remembered her. The moment his footsteps faded beyond the gates, the silence inside the mansion shattered. "You fool!" Her stepmother's voice cut like a whip. She grabbed a vase and flung it against the wall. The porcelain exploded into shards. Aurora flinched, but didn't fall. "How dare you embarrass this family?" Nari seething, stalking forward. "Did I not say you were to remain hidden?" "I didn't ask to be summoned," Aurora whispered, her voice trembling but steady. Her stepmother's hand cracked across her cheek before she could finish. "You should have kept your eyes down. Do you think we didn't see the way he looked at you? The way he—" She stopped herself, rage twisting her face. "You are a disease to this family." Aurora's sisters found their voices. "Mother's right," Jiwon sneered. "Did you see him ignoring me because of her? If she ruins this chance for us, I'll make her pay. She doesn't even deserve to be in the same room as him." "She should be locked up," the other hissed. "Until this treaty is sealed." Nari smirked wickedly. "Pray Kwan-Su chooses one of my daughters for the Mafia King, because if he dares ask for you—" She leaned close, her smile wicked and cold. "I will make sure you never live to see that day." Laughter followed as her sisters mocked her retreating figure, their taunts echoing in her ears. But as Aurora slipped into the dark corridor, her fingers curled into fists. The slap still burned on her skin, but the fire in her chest was stronger. They thought they could cage her. They thought they could erase her, but Minjun had recognized her, and that single threat of hope was enough to fuel her defiance. Maybe, just maybe, her wings were not broken yet. Her mother came first. A Nigerian woman far from home who had loved Aurora fiercely despite the cage she'd been thrown into. Her father had died young, leaving them vulnerable. When her mother remarried Mr. Kwan-Su, it had seemed like salvation, stability, a chance at a new life. But salvation turned to nightmare. Kwan-Su had hidden his true face at first. By the time her mother discovered who he really was, it was too late. Divorce was impossible. Pride and cruelty burned in his veins. He beat her until her body was too weak to fight. Aurora could still remember the muffled cries in the night, the bruises her mother tried to hide. And then, when the rest of the family arrived, the torment grew worse. His eldest son was a monster in a boy's skin. He beat Aurora until she fainted, laughing as if it were a game. His sisters joined in, pretending it was play, their giggles sharp as knives while she lay broken on the floor. She had run away from home countless times, but her stepfather always found her. But now Minjun, the Mafia King, he could be her only hope left. Days later, the hall was suffocating in silence as Minjun's voice cut through the air. "I have made my decision, Aurora." Every breath caught. Aurora's heart thundered. The sisters froze in disbelief, their painted smiles cracking. Her stepmother rose smoothly, her voice breaking the stillness. "My lord," she said, bowing slightly, her tone sweet but laced with venom, "I beg you to reconsider." All eyes turned to her. She pointed her finger sharply at Aurora. "She is not fit to stand beside you. She is fragile, weak, a sickly girl who brings misfortune wherever she goes. Why do you think I hid her away? Why do you think she doesn't carry herself like the others? She is cursed. If you take her, your empire will bleed." The room tensed, waiting. Director Kwan-Su's jaw tightened. He said nothing. The sisters' eyes glittered, convinced her poison would sink deep into the Mafia King's heart. But Minjun, he didn't flinch. His expression didn't change. Only his gaze grew colder, sharper, like a blade unsheathing. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of death. "Are you finished?" The stepmother froze, her lips parting in shock. "I choose who I want," he said, his voice low but cutting. "My choice stands. And she is who I choose." Director Kwan-Su rose from his seat, his heavy frame towering over the hall. "You have made a good choice, Minjun," he declared, raising his glass. "They are all my daughters, blood of my blood. And now, through you, we become family." The mansion glowed with preparations for the grand wedding. Servants scurried like shadows, carrying trays, setting flowers, polishing gold. Her stepmother's threats had grown sharper, her sister's mockery crueler. And now Hyunjae was back, the eldest son, her tormentor, the monster who had carved fear into her childhood and wore it as amusement. His laughter came before his footsteps, echoing from the doorway of the grand hall as he greeted his father with a hearty clap on the back. That sound alone tightened Aurora's chest until it hurt to breathe. "My son returns," Director Kwan-soo boomed proudly, smiling wide. Hyunjae's grin was sharp, his eyes cruel. "Father, I heard the news. Our little bird is going to marry the Mafia King. I can't believe he of all men chose her." His gaze slid to Aurora. He circled her slowly like a predator studying prey. "I can't see what he saw in you," he whispered, "but I suppose I'll find out soon enough." Aurora's fists curled in her lap. The family watched, smirking. No one stopped him. No one ever had. Hyunjae's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. He yanked her toward the dark corridor. "Come, sister," he said mockingly. "Let's have some fun while we can." Her eyes widened, then narrowed. She tried to pull away. "Let me go." His breath darkened, and a slow, chilling smile spread across his lips. His hands tore at her dress with savage intensity, fury sparking in his eyes. "Ungrateful brat. You think you're better than us now because the Mafia King looked at you twice? Then I'll remind you exactly what you are." Aurora fought, her body twisting, her nails clawing, but he was stronger. Her mind raced, desperation clawing her chest. She could take the words, she could take the cruelty, she could take the slaps. But not this, not ever. "You're still nothing," he growled, his hands rough against her skin. "And I'll make sure you remember it." Across the city, the night was quiet, but Minjun couldn't rest. He sat in his study, staring at the untouched glass of whiskey on the table. His men moved around him in silence, sensing the storm in their leader's eyes. Her face haunted him. Her eyes had pleaded with him that night, as though begging him not to leave her behind. And now something was wrong. He felt it in his chest like a weight, heavy and suffocating. His jaw tightened. He rose abruptly. "Jin-woo," he said, his voice low, commanding. "We're going to Director Kwan-soo's house tonight." There was no hesitation. Jin-woo bowed deeply. "Yes, sir." Minjun stepped out into the night, his long coat brushing the ground, his men following like shadows. His instincts screamed at him. And they had never lied. This wasn't just unease. This was danger. If anyone dared to lay a hand on her, blood would paint the Kwan-soo mansion before dawn. Back at Director Kwan-soo's home, Aurora's eyes landed on the polished wine bottle on the table. She jerked free just enough to snatch it. With a cry, she smashed it against the wood, the glass shattering into jagged edges. She held the neck tight, the sharp shards trembling in her hand. "Come closer," she warned, her voice raw, shaking but firm. "One step, Hyunjae. Just one and I'll cut you." Hyunjae froze for only a second before grinning, bloodlust in his eyes. "You dare threaten me!" He lunged anyway. Her scream split the air as she slashed. The jagged glass tore across his cheek, blood spilling instantly. Hyunjae roared, clutching his face, fury erupting in his veins. "You little witch!" He lunged again, but a knock shattered the air. The pounding on the door froze them both. Hyunjae's mother's voice cut through the silence. "Hyunjae, enough games. The Mafia King is here. He's in our house." The words struck the air like lightning. Aurora's chest heaved as she stumbled back, her torn clothes clinging to her body, the broken bottle still trembling in her grip. Her ears rang with those words. "The Mafia King is here. Minjun." Her heart raced wildly. Relief, fear, and confusion all tangled together inside her chest. Hyun-jae's face twisted in fury, blood running down his cheek. He turned toward the door, cursing under his breath. Damn him! Of all nights he comes now. He turned to her before walking out. This isn't over. The great doors of the mansion swung open, and silence rippled through the grand hall. Minjun entered with measured steps, his men fanning out like shadows at his back. His presence was heavy, commanding. The air itself seemed to bow. Director Kwan-soo forced a smile rising from his seat. Ah, the great Minjun honors us with his presence tonight. Minjun's cold gaze swept the hall. I came unannounced. I trust that is not a problem. No, Director Kwan-soo chuckled, though his jaw tightened. My home is yours, Mafia King. But Minjun wasn't listening. His eyes narrowed. Something felt off. Something smelled like fear. Heavy footsteps approached. The door opened. Hyun-jae stepped out first, wiping blood from his cheek. His movements were stiff, his grin too wide. Forgive me for keeping you waiting, boss, Hyun-jae said, attempting to mask his fear. Behind him, Aurora emerged. Her clothes were torn, her hair tangled, her face pale. She kept her head bowed, but her trembling hands betrayed her. Minjun's eyes sharpened instantly. He noticed everything, the red marks on her skin, the broken bottle still faintly clutched in her hand, the way she avoided his gaze. Something primal stirred inside him. His fingers flexed at his sides, though his face remained unreadable. The hall had gone silent. All eyes shifted between Minjun, Hyun-jae, and the girl at his back. Minjun stepped forward slowly. His shoes clicked against the polished floor, the sound echoing like a drumbeat of war. Who hurt her? His voice was soft, but it cut through the air like a blade. Hyun-jae froze, then forced a laugh. Boss, you misunderstand. She fell. Clumsy as always. Isn't that right, little sister? Aurora's lips parted, but no sound came out. That was all Minjun needed. His jaw tightened. He turned to Jinwoo without taking his eyes off Aurora. Lock the doors. Yes, sir. The heavy thud of the doors shutting echoed like a death knell. In that moment, everyone in the mansion realized war was about to happen. Minjun stood before Aurora now, closer than anyone dared to be. His tall frame cast a shadow over her trembling body. He reached out, his fingers curling under her chin, forcing her to look up at him. Her eyes, wide, broken, but still burning, met his. Tell me, he said, his voice low and dangerous, exactly what happened. The hall went deathly silent. Aurora's chest rose and fell. Her family's eyes bored into her. She could feel their unspoken threats. Stay silent or suffer later. But something inside her cracked. No tears came, only fury. Her voice trembled at first, then sharpened like glass as she spoke. Every vile thing Hyun-jae had tried to do to her, the torn clothes, his hands on her body, the way her family had just stood by and watched, as if it were nothing. Each word cut through the hall like thunder. Hyun-jae paled, his hands still pressed against his bleeding cheek. Lies! He shouted hoarsely. All lies. I never touched her. Director Kwan-soo stepped forward quickly, forcing a laugh. Boss, siblings, children quarrel. They play rough, but... Silence. The single word froze him mid-step. Minjun didn't even look at Kwan-soo. His black eyes stayed locked on Aurora's. He leaned slightly closer, his voice soft enough for only her to hear. And what did you do when he touched you? Her breath caught. Slowly she lifted her hand, the same hand that still clutched the broken bottle. I cut him, she said, her voice steady now, defiance blazing in her eyes. I sliced his face. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Minjun's lips curved into the faintest smile. You did well, he said, straightening. But that is not the punishment meant for such a man. Hyun-jae scoffed, trying to mask his fear. Boss, she's lying. I swear I never... The gunshot shattered the hall. Hyunjae's scream followed a second later as he dropped to his knees, clutching his right hand. Blood poured between his fingers, the gun smoke still curling from Minjun's weapon. Gasps erupted around the room. Aurora's stepmother cried out. Her sisters shrieked. Director Kwon-soo himself froze wide-eyed. Minjun didn't flinch. His gun remained steady in his grip, aimed casually at the boy writhing on the floor. His voice was cold, merciless. "Next time," he said evenly, "this is how you deal with a man like that. You don't scream. You don't beg. You take away the hand that dared to touch her." His eyes flicked back to Aurora, dark, burning, unreadable. "Do you understand, little dove?" Her lips parted, her body trembling. Not with fear, but with something else entirely. Power. Rage. The taste of justice for the first time in her life. "Yes," she whispered. "I understand." Director Kwon-soo finally found his voice, fury breaking through his shock. "Minjun, how dare you shoot my son in my own house?" Minjun turned his head slowly, his gaze landing on Kwon-soo with lethal calm. "How dare your son touch what is mine?" The hall erupted in whispers. His men tightened formation, guns half drawn, ready for blood. "You should be grateful," Minjun said coldly, his gaze fixed on Director Kwon-soo, then flicking briefly to Hyunjae writhing on the floor. "That it was only his hand, because for what he dared to do, it should have been his head." The room stayed quiet. No one dared breathe too loud. And for the first time, the most notorious gangster in Seoul, Director Kwon-soo, looked uncertain. His fists clenched at his sides, his teeth grinding, rage burning in his eyes. His men looked to him, waiting for an order. But none came, because across from him stood Minjun, calm, unshaken, gun still smoking in his hand. His men spread like shadows around him, their weapons gleaming under the chandelier's light. One wrong move and the Kwon-soo family would drown in their own blood before they could even breathe. Kwon-soo's chest rose and fell, his pride warring with his survival instinct. He wanted to roar, he wanted to strike, he wanted revenge for his son's humiliation. But his mind screamed the truth. He could not win tonight, not against him. So he forced a laugh, brittle and hollow. "Boss Kwon-soo appreciates passionate decisiveness," he said, his voice strained, his fury hidden beneath forced civility. "A misunderstanding has been corrected." His wife flinched at his words. His daughters lowered their eyes. Everyone in the hall could see it clearly. Director Kwon-soo, the man feared by all of Seoul, had just been forced to bow in silence. Minjun finally lowered his gun, slipping it back into the holster beneath his coat. His gaze returned to Aurora. He stepped toward her slowly, deliberately. Without hesitation, he bent and lifted her into his arms. The hall fell deathly silent. Aurora gasped softly, her arms instinctively clutching at his shoulders. Minjun's deep voice broke the silence, carrying through the mansion like a decree. "She belongs to me now. From this moment forward, if anyone, family or enemy, dares to touch her again, I will burn this house to the ground with my own hands." He turned, carrying her effortlessly, his men closing around him like an impenetrable wall. Director Kwon-soo's fists curled at his sides, his teeth grinding with the effort not to explode. But he stayed silent, swallowing the anger like poison. The gates closed behind them, and inside, the Kwon-soo family trembled, knowing the war had already begun. The heavy doors of the mansion closed behind Minjun, leaving suffocating silence in their wake. Hyunjae writhed on the floor, clutching the bloody ruin of his hand, his screams turning into whimpers. Director Kwon-soo stood motionless, his chest heaving, his hands trembling at his sides. His family remained frozen in terror, waiting for his explosion. His wife ventured a step closer. "My husband," she whispered cautiously. "What do we do now?" "Do?" His voice started quiet but then rose, shaking the walls. "He humiliated me in my own house. He shot my son in front of me. He took that wretched girl as though she were his prize." He slammed his fist onto the table, splintering the wood. His daughters flinched, but even through his rage, the bitter truth cut deep. Minjun had more power, more men, more fear in his name. To strike now would mean death. Kwan Su's lips curled into a snarl. Let him enjoy his triumph. Let him think he has won. But mark my words, the day will come when I tear everything from him. And that girl, his eyes narrowed into slits, she will curse the day she crossed me. Meanwhile, across the city, the car hummed quietly as it carried them away from her stepmother's house. Aurora sat rigid, her torn dress clinging to her body. Yet beside her was the man who had changed everything the moment he walked in, Minjun. He hadn't spoken since they left. His silence wasn't cold, it was weighty, purposeful. She glanced at him, studying his sharp profile, the strength in his jaw, the stillness that spoke of a man used to commanding death itself. And yet tonight he had carried her out of the fire as though she was something precious. Her throat tightened. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft, almost breaking. He turned, his dark eyes locking on hers. "Don't thank me," he said quietly, his voice deep and steady. "I did what should have been done long ago." Her breath shivered. No one had ever spoken for her like that. By the time they arrived at his estate, her heart was already in chaos. The mansion towered like a fortress, its lights spilling across the night. Guards bowed as the car stopped, but Minjun's focus never left her. He stepped out first, then extended his hand. Aurora hesitated only a second before taking it. His touch was warm, grounding. She expected steel but found gentleness instead. Inside, the house was vast and glittering, but she barely noticed. Her pulse was too loud, her emotions too raw. He led her to a room with wide windows overlooking Seoul, the city sparkling like a sea of stars below. After she had changed, he turned to her. "You'll stay here," he said, his tone soft but firm. "No one will touch you again." Her lips trembled. She swallowed hard, gathering courage. "Why?" Her voice was a whisper, fragile but desperate. "Why are you being so kind to me?" "You could have left me there." Minjun stepped closer. His hand rose slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her face with such gentleness it sent shivers through her. For a moment she closed her eyes, afraid her tears would fall. "I don't do kindness," he murmured, his gaze burning into hers. "But when I saw you tonight, I knew I couldn't let them break you any further." Her heart clenched. She had lived her whole life fighting to appear strong, never letting anyone see her cracks. But under his words, under his steady hand, her walls crumbled. She felt herself melting, frighteningly, helplessly into him. "You're safe now," he said, his voice a low promise. "No one can touch you here." "Rest, Aurora." He turned to leave. And that's when it happened. Words spilling from her before she even thought. "Wait." He paused. His hand lingered on the door, but his head turned, his dark eyes catching hers. Her heart thudded painfully. She should have swallowed it, rebuilt her walls like always. But tonight she couldn't. Tonight, for the first time, she didn't want to be alone. "Stay," she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. "Please stay with me tonight." The silence stretched heavy and charged. Even she was startled at what she had said. Never had she asked anyone for comfort. Never had she let her needs show. But the thought of the night swallowing her whole, the memories of Hyunjai's laughter, the sound of her family's cruelty was unbearable. Minjun's eyes softened, just barely, but enough for her to see the shift. He crossed the room slowly, each step steady and deliberate, until he stood before her. "You surprise me, little dove," he murmured, crouching slightly so his gaze was level with hers. His hand lifted, brushing her cheek with the gentlest touch, as though she were made of glass. "You've lived behind walls your whole life, and tonight you're asking me in." She swallowed hard, her throat tight. "Because tonight I don't want to be strong. I want to feel something other than fear. Something dangerous flickered in his gaze. Not danger to her, but to anyone who had ever hurt her. He exhaled slowly, as though grounding himself. "Then I'll stay," he said quietly. He sat beside her, and without thinking, Aurora leaned closer, her head brushing against his shoulder. For a heartbeat, she froze, expecting him to push her away. But he didn't. Instead, his arm came around her, pulling her gently into his chest. His warmth wrapped around her like armor, his steady heartbeat beneath her ear, a rhythm she never knew she needed. Her tears finally slipped free, silent but endless. He said nothing, only held her tighter, his hands smoothing over her hair with a tenderness she could hardly believe from the man they called the Mafia King. And as sleep pulled at her, she whispered into the darkness, "Thank you for staying." His lips brushed her forehead, a fleeting touch before he answered in a voice like a vow, "As long as you need me, Aurora, I'll stay. Always." That night, for the first time in her life, Aurora didn't sleep in fear. She slept in his arms, wrapped in the protection of the most dangerous man in Seoul. And for the first time, she felt safe. She felt home. To be continued. Thank you so much for watching. The storm is far from over. Tell me what you think in the comments below and hit that notification bell, because what happens next will shake everything to its core. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more captivating stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Every episode gets darker. Every twist cuts deeper. You won't want to miss what comes next.